He's back with a vengeance, this time revealing his real name. We all know we're in it for the story because it's a shocking reveal, because it's Morgott, the Omen King. I'm Horizon Shield. Let's make this easy. As always, I'm doing this fight without summons or spirits, without blocks or parries. If you choose to use them, that's alright. I'm just a guy on the internet showing you one way to play. Use your own way, it's your game. I'm doing this fight at level 51 with 2 plus 14 Lordsworn longswords because they're fun, no other reason. I'm also using a full set of Godric's Knight gear for armor, and then for talismans, the Ritual Sword Talisman, Star Scourge Heirloom, Assassin's Crimson Dagger, and the Green Turtle Talisman. Fight the way you want. So what can Morgott actually do? Well, there are a ton of attacks in this fight. So we're actually going to break this up into a variety of sections. First off, we're going to kick it off with his regular sword attacks. Then we're going to go to his spirit weapons that he summons. He can summon 4 different weapons in total. A dagger, a sword, a spear, and a hammer. I'll go through each as a chunk at a time, so if you're looking for a specific move, kind of jump to that section. We'll get you covered. First up is the single swipe. These are usually just over-the-shoulder swings. They're relatively quick and very simple. You can dodge any of these by rolling backwards to prepare for any of the follow-ups, because if you stay too close, there are a lot of nasty things that you can combo with. Since it's the first thing in the combo, he has nearly everything in his kit that he can follow up with, so just roll backwards and don't even worry about this attack. The horizontal sweep is another of the follow-up attacks after the single swipe, however it can also be seen independently after a couple of his other attacks. It's just a delayed horizontal slash. He simply holds the blade behind himself before he swings in an arc in front of him. So to dodge, you can just roll through it. The attack is actually pretty delayed, so you try not to dodge too early, otherwise you're going to end up getting hit. Another of the common follow-ups is a simple stab. This actually can be dodged by not moving at all, funny enough. He naturally misses because his sword is curved. This attack is actually just telegraphed by him pulling his sword back pointed towards you and simply thrusting it forward. I always recommend just walking backwards and rolling to dodge the attack. You are going to end up loving the stab because it has a guaranteed follow-up. Several of Morgott's attacks in this fight have guaranteed follow-ups that we can punish if you choose to do so and if you feel comfortable. If you don't worry about it, just roll backwards and dodge. But for this one in particular, you can follow up with a double slash. So moving on to describe the double slash, it is simply him swinging once, doing a basic flip, and swinging a second time. Telegraph is pretty easy, he always does this after the stab. To dodge, you can actually just roll between these attacks independently, one right after the other. So it's not too crazy of a dodge. However, if you stay within range, you will always follow up with a dagger swipe and a hammer sweep, which we can punish those. So that's what we're going to end up doing in the actual fight. If you're not comfortable with it, just roll backwards and dodge everything. That's kind of the key thing here. Roll backwards to dodge if you're unsure. But I'll be covering both of those attacks a little later on. I'm not going to cover them right now. Next up is the side dash from the left. Telegraphed by him dashing to your left while raising his blade before doing a horizontal dash while sweeping his blade to actually hit you. The timing for the roll is when his left arm is parallel to the ground. He slowly raises it after dashing. You can pay attention to that or just kind of get a feel for the timing. Either way, whichever works for you. There is actually time enough between his first and second dashes to get a single swing in. Use it if you want, but it's not required. Morgott also likes to do a side dash from the right. I'm going to call it a quick dash because it's like a ninja flip thing. It's quicker than the other one, you know. So this one is actually telegraphed by him doing a flip over to your right before waiting and then doing a dash towards you while swiping, very similar to the other side. But this one is much faster. You can heavily manipulate the attack that comes after this one, depending on the distance and position that you are in after he finishes the attack. So use that to your advantage, and I'll cover it during the actual fight. Several of the follow-ups for the quick dash we actually go over as separate moves. However, one that is specific to the quick dash is the twirling retreat. He has several retreating attacks, obviously. If you happen to get behind him or directly next to him after he does the quick dash, he'll do another twirling retreat away. It's simply him swinging his blade from one side to the other and then jumping backwards. Nothing too crazy, but you can dodge the swipe by just doing a simple roll straight through the blade. Another of his very simple retreats is the swipe retreat. He does a single horizontal slash and then jumps directly backwards. There's not a huge telegraph for it, and it is fairly fast. Just roll through the attack when you see it's coming, and you should be just fine. Crazy enough, we've seen all of these dagger moves before in the first fight. So, kicking off with a dagger throw, well, he just spawns a dagger in his hand and throws it towards you. He can either do it once or twice in a row. It depends on what moves he's doing. But to dodge the actual dagger throw itself, I recommend dodging any way that you want, directly through the daggers themselves. I don't recommend just walking side to side anymore, because there are 3 daggers, and they can hit you independently for triple the damage. One of the follow-ups to the dagger throw is, well, a dagger retreat. It's going to be the exact same as it was before. He simply swipes with the weapon, jumps, and throws daggers at the player. This is far less common in this fight than it was before. I actually had significant trouble trying to record it because he doesn't use this very much because he never retreats. Take it in stride and start walking towards him. Another attack that should look exactly the same as before is the double dagger swipe. It is significantly more manageable in this fight because we know when it's going to happen. It's not nearly as aggressive as it was the first time. So if you're too close after some of his moves, he'll do 2 swipes with the dagger after he spawns it in his left hand. It's a good reason not to get too close to him after some of his moves if you are not comfortable with it. So to dodge, you can roll right and then left after each swing. If you're late on the first dodge, you will get hit by the second. Just letting you know that before you try it. He will always follow this up with a hammer swipe or a spear throw depending on how far you go when he starts the attack. So this is a guaranteed move that you can get damage on. Next up we have the sword attacks. Kicking off with the single sword swipe. He spawns a sword in his left hand, swings with the spirit sword, and then does a overhead slam with his regular sword. This will lead to 2 possible follow-ups. He may either end the combo there, or if you're too close, he may do a double dagger swipe at you, which means you can get the damage in after the hammer sweep, if you so choose. But for the dodges, you can either do it 2 ways. You can get out of range, which is very common if you're not comfortable with it yet, or you can roll through actual attacks themselves or stick close to him to trigger that dagger swipe. The second sword attack is a sword whirlwind. This attack shows itself by doing a single swipe of the sword, followed up by a whirlwind of both of his blades, and then following lastly by a slamming with both blades. The last slam does 2 separate attacks, so be careful on the dodging if you're trying to dodge through it. To dodge the rest of the attack, the easiest way is going to be getting out of range entirely, or alternatively you can dodge to his right, the side without the swords. However, there's a good chance you're still going to get hit no matter what if you try to do that, so I always recommend trying to trigger the attack and running straight back. You will only ever see this move after 2 attacks, the quick dash and the hammer slam. If you want to do damage after this attack, you can actually roll towards him during the last slam, dodge both of the blades, ending up right next to him for a couple of swings. Now onto the spear attacks. First up we have a simple stab. This move is telegraphed by him just spawning a spear to his side and stabbing it straight forward into your face. If you have to be too close afterwards, he will also follow up with a sword swipe. As soon as he spawns it, you can start rolling, essentially. It's a very fast move, so try to act quickly. You can also just walk backwards so you don't have to worry about it, but it's up to you. The second attack is a running stab. He will grab the spear with both hands that he spawns and run directly towards you. This goes for a set distance. The easiest way to dodge this attack is actually to roll through it. Don't go left or right, as it's still going to hit you. If you roll straight through it, there's a chance that you can do damage afterwards. Be careful you're not dodging too late, because you can be hit multiple times by this attack as it drags you around. One of his favorite range attacks in this entire fight is the spear throw. He only does this attack when there's a bit of distance between himself and you. He telegraphs this attack by spotting a spear as if he's drawing it back to throw a javelin. To dodge this attack, watch the elbow. As soon as you see the elbow, dodge. It's simple as that. You can roll straight through it as soon as you see his elbow because you know he's about to release it. You can do damage during this attack if you're able to get close enough to him for a couple of swings. Be careful about walking straight into him because the spear can hit directly in front of him, so kind of walk off to the side before you start swinging. Another of the ways that he can close some distance with the player is the leaping slam. This shows Morgott leaping towards the player, pausing momentarily in the air, and then spawning his spear before slamming down. This attack will attempt to land on the player. You can dodge it by either walking away or even walking underneath him if you're wanting to. Next up are the hammer attacks. The first one is the hammer slam. So, spotting a hammer directly behind him on the ground and raising his foot, he will then proceed to drop his foot and swing the hammer forward, doing an area of attack in front of him that does quite a big range of damage. To dodge, always make sure you're dodging when you see this attack because the range is so large. It's very simple. As soon as he starts to drop his foot, go ahead and dodge. If you're having trouble timing it, watch the foot, not the hammer. I do not recommend trying to punish this attack, as he can do some pretty nasty follow-ups, including the sword whirlwind, which I have a very hard time dodging when I'm right next to him, so don't even worry about it if you're not feeling comfortable with it. Next up we have the hammer sweep. This attack is telegraphed by him spotting a hammer on his shoulder and then swinging his sword and the hammer itself in an arc in front of him. This attack is very easy to see coming, so it's pretty well telegraphed. To dodge, you can dodge to either of his sides or directly away from him if you so choose. If you're wanting to dodge to the sides, I recommend the left. If you dodge to the right, the camera will mess up and you might get hit after he finishes it. However, if you dodge to the left, the camera will autocorrect faster and you can go ahead and start hitting him without fear of getting hit because your camera is messing up. He also has a gap closer with the hammer itself. This is the hammer dash. He will spawn the hammer on his shoulder while the sword starts to glow white, and then he charges directly at you. There are two different attacks that he does with this. So he can either do a simple hammer slam, or he can do a 360 sweep with the hammer as well, leading up to a hammer sweep. There's no real telegraph to see which one it's going to be before he does it, so the easiest way to dodge is to roll back once before he gets to you, once immediately after to dodge the sweep, and then a third time to dodge the roundabout sweep if he happens to do the full sweep attack. If he's just doing the hammer slam, it's pretty easy just to roll backwards once and wait for the slam to dodge the second time. But you have to be paying attention to which one it is. Yet another leap attack in this fight is the hammer leap. Shockingly, he jumps in the air with the hammer behind him and then slams it down, with a very similar pattern to the hammer slam. It's a little bit wider of an area, so recommend rolling as he hits the ground. But truth be told, this attack is very rare. You might not even see it. So don't worry about trying to get damage in, just roll backwards and recover, wait for his next attack. Funny enough, if you get behind him at any point, he doesn't seem to like that, so he still has his tail swipe. Going from right to left, it's a pretty easy telegraph of him curling his tail before swinging it. You can dodge directly through the tail, so it's not that big of a deal. You've already seen this once before. When you get Morgott to roughly 80% health, he will unlock a new move, the Summoned Sword Rain, or the Sword's Revealing Light, whichever you prefer. It creates an X shape with one prong directly in front of wherever Morgott is facing, most likely that means directly above you. If you're close, you can get a single hit in and run away before the middle circle of swords falls. So, try to pick a direction that gives you the most space back into the arena to dodge all of his other attacks while the swords are still falling. However, if you can't do that immediately, you can walk between the swords if you want, but it's not always the best because Morgott is going to be attacking you while you try to dodge. And you cannot dodge through the swords themselves. Please don't try it. After hitting 50% health, he will fall to his knees and gain massive damage resistance as part of a phase transition. This transition will end as he stands up and releases a massive circle of liquid stuff. I don't know, dude. It doesn't apply an ailment. Kinda looks like poop. Just imagine it as you want to. As he does this move, there will be a radius in which puddles appear. These puddles explode upward after a few seconds. In the immediate range of Morgott, the circles are much more common and much more difficult to see. So if you want to get a few hits in as he stands up, feel free. I'm also going to point out the puddles now spawn after most of his major attacks. So be wary of them and try not to stand on top of them. They will explode and do quite a bit of damage if you do so. Now that we're in the second half of the fight, he has a couple new attacks. The first one is the full windup. It's literally the exact same move, except this time there are explosions attached to the blade. So telegraphed by him standing sideways with the sword held above his head, glowing red this time. Depending on the distance, he has two attacks. If you are close, he will do a simple overhead smash. If you are far enough away, he will dash towards you and swing twice in succession. All these swings leave a trail of explosions, so be careful about rolling side to side. To dodge these attacks, if you're close enough, walk over his left side behind his knee, same as before, and start swinging. However, if you're too far away, you can roll through both of the double swings just fine, and the explosions don't really matter. His second red glowing attack is the Impalement attack. Slightly crouching while preparing his blade directly pointed at you, he then charges you and does his best to impersonate Vlad the Impaler before flinging you off like any other dirty tarnished. The dodge for this attack is fairly simple. Don't worry about the start of the charge. As he's moving in towards you and preparing to stab, his elbow and the whole blade will pull back slightly. When you see that, hit the dodge button. You'll dodge it better than any other timing that I've come to find. If you dodge any other time, you'll get stabbed and get teleported back onto the blade. Load of crap, if you ask me. It's how it is. The last of his attacks in this fight is the full combo. He starts by spotting a dagger in his hand, and then lets loose with every attack he has in the book, while trying to swat a fly, it looks like. Starts with the dagger, moves to the sword, ends with the hammer slam. So just roll backwards, let him do his thing. You're not going to be hitting him during this. Just walk away. But be mindful of the distance between you and the back wall behind you, because he does move a bit of distance during this. If the worst happens and we get hit, when can we heal? Well, it's a little bit easier than the first fight, because he isn't nearly as aggressive. You can either heal during the sword rain, after the leap stab, or after a whirlwind jump if you want. There's just a couple of attacks, use your best judgment. The second phase is even easier, because you can heal during any of the attacks. Just pick your timing, you can either walk away from most of them, and just heal pretty easily. So how do we bring it together to finish this fight? Well, there are a lot of attacks individually. Hopefully you understood most of them, but thankfully I see the vast majority of those attacks in this fight as well. So there's a couple different ways you can play this fight, but it all depends on how you yourself want to do it. So specifically, there's two ways that you can do it. One, stick directly next to him. Try to bait out the hammer swing as often as possible, and that's how you're going to be getting your damage in. Alternatively, you can actually just keep your distance, wait for him to do one of his more ranged attacks, and try to go in and punish that. But it all depends on how proactive you want to be. The second approach can take a very long time, because he doesn't do the spear throw or like the spear stab all that often, but he does do it every once in a while. Alternatively, if you're wanting to stick close and kind of speed up the fight a bit, you can dodge through the hammer swing. Since I didn't actually mention when to actually dodge, when you see the bottom of his elbow, that's when you roll through it. If you plan on sticking next to him, one big thing that I'll mention is be wary of your stamina. It depends on which weapon you're using. Obviously, it depends how much stamina you're going to be using per swing, but you do have to worry about your stamina in this fight. It's one of the main reasons I'm using the Green Turtle Talisman. To get more stamina faster, even if it's just a little bit, it does count quite a bit. I did leave one of the talisman slots open for you, so if you want to switch out that Assassin's Crimson Dagger, feel free. That one's free to use. You can swap it for a defense charm or say like Radagon Sword Seal in case you're just wanting more damage. But obviously it's your game, choose the way you want to play it, right? A lot of this fight is going to be depending on your positioning. Either directly next to him to trigger certain attacks, or even to bait out some of his attacks. It all depends on the distance between you and him. If he ever does a side dash, you can manipulate which side he runs to depending on how far you are and which direction you are in comparison to him. He'll always go over about directly to your right. It just depends on how much you want to move, or if you want to position him out in the middle of the arena so that you can start walking backwards and get a little bit more space. Whenever he does one of his quick dashes, if you want to try to bait out one of the attacks, roll close to him in front of him, and you should bait out one of the closer attacks. If it does happen to be the whirlwind after the quick dash, that's all the better for you, but it entirely depends on what you're wanting to do with the fight. It's personally one of my favorite attacks, but it's up to you. After you get him into the second phase, I've always found that it's significantly easier because the full windup and the impalement attack are both significantly easier to punish, and they happen more often than a lot of his other attacks. If you're having trouble with the timing on the dodges, always kind of watch out for his elbow. It's one of his biggest tells in the majority of his attacks, as well as his foot dropping for a couple of his other attacks. It just lines up nicely. Congratulations, there's now one less boss between you and the Elden throne. If this was helpful, feel free to like and subscribe to see me break down the rest of the bosses in Elden Ring. Until then, happy hunting.